Opendoor stock has kicked off the week under a brand new chapter, and today is about much more than just price movement. Yes, we saw the natural aftermath of last week's surge, with some profit-taking and consolidation, but the real story now is the cultural and strategic transformation underway at the company. This is the first official day with Kaz Nejatian at the helm as CEO, and it's also the first day with Keith Rabois and Eric Wu back on the board. That's right, the co-founders of Opendoor are back in the driver's seat, and that's something every long-term investor should be paying attention to. The phrase founder DNA gets thrown around a lot in the investing world, but it's not just a buzzword. Founder DNA is the energy, the vision, and the sense of ownership that original creators bring to a company. It's the force that transforms an idea into a generational business. And today, with both Keith Rabois and Eric Wu rejoining Opendoor's board alongside Kaz stepping in as CEO, Opendoor is officially re-entering what I'd call founder mode. This matters, because in the history of disruptive companies, founder DNA has almost always been the catalyst for long-term value creation. Think about Apple when Steve Jobs returned in the late 90s. The company was on the ropes, out of innovation, and struggling to define itself. Jobs came back, refocused the mission, and unleashed the products that built Apple into the multi-trillion-dollar giant it is today. Or look at Elon Musk with Tesla. He's not just an executive, he's the embodiment of Tesla's mission. Investors don't just buy shares of Tesla, they buy into Musk's vision of an electric, sustainable future. That's the power of founder DNA. It creates belief, and that belief is what drives capital, talent, and customers into the business. Now apply that same principle to Opendoor. This is a company that was co-founded by Keith Rabois and Eric Wu back in 2013. They weren't just building another real estate company, they were trying to redefine how homes are bought and sold. That's an ambitious vision, one that, at times, has looked almost too ambitious. But when you bring the founders back into the fold, you're not just adding names to the board, you're reigniting that original spark, that uncompromising sense of what Opendoor can be. Keith Rabois is now chairman, and that role matters. He's not coming back as a passive participant. He's going to be shaping the strategy, guiding the CEO, and ensuring that execution matches the vision. And this is Keith Rabois we're talking about, someone who has sat at the table with the PayPal mafia, who helped shape companies like LinkedIn, Square, and Stripe, and who has been a major investor in names like DoorDash, Affirm, and Palantir. This is someone who has an incredible track record of spotting disruptive models before they scale, and now he's putting his energy back into the company he co-founded. Eric Wu's return is just as important. Wu spent nearly a decade leading Opendoor as CEO before stepping away, and now he's back on the board with a fresh perspective. This isn't just about nostalgia, it's about bringing in someone who knows the business inside and out, who understands the pain points of scaling, and who still believes in the mission enough to invest another $40 million of his own money alongside Khosla Ventures. That's real conviction. You don't put tens of millions of your own dollars back into a company unless you see extraordinary upside potential. And then we layer on top of this the arrival of Kaz Nejatian as CEO. Kaz comes straight out of Shopify, where he was the number 2 executive, helping run a $200 billion company and scaling one of the most powerful commerce platforms in the world. What's incredible is that he left that role, a role many thought would lead to him becoming Shopify's next CEO, to join Opendoor. Why? Because he sees the potential here. He sees the ability to turn Opendoor into an AI-driven platform that redefines the entire home buying and selling process. That's not just about technology, it's about mission. And when you combine his execution skills with the passion and vision of the founders, you get the kind of leadership team that can actually deliver on the promise of becoming the Amazon of real estate. This combination, Kaz as the AI-native operator, Keith as the strategic chairman, and Eric Wu as the seasoned founder investor, is what makes this moment so powerful. It's not just about individuals, it's about chemistry. The founders are back to inject belief and vision, while Kaz is here to implement and scale. It's the perfect balance between founder DNA and operational excellence. So why does this matter to shareholders today? Because markets ultimately reward belief. When investors, employees, and customers believe in the mission of a company, it becomes self-fulfilling. It's easier to raise capital, easier to attract talent, easier to convince customers to give the product a chance. Founder DNA creates gravitational pull, and that's exactly what Opendoor has reignited this week. Now, let's talk about the timing. This is happening at a moment when macro conditions may soon start turning in Opendoor's favor. The Federal Reserve is widely expected to cut interest rates next week, and that's a tailwind for housing. Lower rates make mortgages more affordable, stimulate demand, and increase transaction activity, all things that benefit Opendoor's business model. Couple that with the fact that Opendoor now has leadership explicitly focused on AI innovation and platform scalability, and you start to see why so many investors are excited. And excitement is building. Eric Jackson, who has become one of the loudest advocates for Opendoor, has grown his following from 30,000 to over 100,000 on X in just weeks because of this movement. He's calling for Opendoor to reach $50 and eventually $82, and now even floating the idea of $500 a share within 5 years. Whether or not you agree with those exact numbers, what matters is that belief is spreading. Retail investors are mobilized, institutions are starting to pay attention again, and short sellers, who still control a significant percentage of the float, are increasingly under pressure. The story now is not whether Opendoor can survive, it's about how big this company can become. And when you have founders back in the mix, pushing the mission, and reminding everyone what the company was created for, it raises the ceiling dramatically. You're no longer just talking about incremental growth, you're talking about category dominance. You're talking about Opendoor not just being another real estate company but being the real estate platform. Another reason the founder DNA angle matters is because it aligns the company's incentives with long-term success rather than short-term profit. Hedge funds and activist investors often come in looking for a quick turnaround, but founders? Founders are thinking in decades. They're thinking about building something that outlasts them. That's why people like Keith Rabois and Eric Wu coming back matters more than any quarterly earnings beat or miss in the short term. It signals to the market that this is a company that is recommitting to its original, disruptive mission, and doing so with fresh energy. And let's not forget, this isn't just symbolism. There's real money behind it. Eric Wu is putting in $40 million of his own money alongside Khosla Ventures. That's skin in the game. That's conviction. That's saying, I believe so strongly in what we're building here that I'm willing to back it with my own capital. That kind of insider confidence can't be ignored. So as we look ahead to this week, it's worth remembering that what happens in the stock price day to day is secondary to what's happening in the fundamentals of the company. Opendoor is being rebuilt from the inside out, with leadership that has both the vision and the capability to execute. That's what founder DNA does. It resets the clock, re-establishes the mission, and invites the market to reimagine what's possible. If you're a long-term investor, the lesson here is simple. Founder DNA is one of the most powerful indicators of future success. History shows it, from Apple to Tesla to countless other examples. And now, with Kaz Nejatian leading, Keith Rabois steering as chairman, and Eric Wu back on the board, Opendoor has reignited its founder DNA. The Open Army knows this, and that's why enthusiasm remains high even in the face of short-term volatility. The coming weeks will bring catalysts. We've got Kaz's first big interview on Tuesday with 20VC. We've got the Fed rate decision likely coming on Wednesday. We've got continued public support from Eric Jackson, Anthony Pompliano, and potentially more influential figures if some of these rumored connections come to fruition. But the real catalyst is already in place. Opendoor has rediscovered its identity, and that identity is rooted in its founders. So as we close out the first trading day under this new era, keep in mind that this is about more than just a stock price at $9, $10, or even $20. This is about a company that is rewriting its future by returning to its past, by putting the founders back in charge of the mission and aligning everything around long-term success. That's the power of founder DNA, and it's why I remain bullish on where this stock can go from here.